We're at that point of the season here in week 4 where there is a lot to talk about, a little bit of drama, a little bit of warming seats, some controversy, big games, of course. I'm John Canzano. You can read me at johncanzano.com. He is Jon Wilner. You can find him at wilnerhotline.com. Wilner, you are currently waiting for a appliance repair company. We have all been there. Take us through the agony.
It's just the scheduling. You know, our oven is broken.
Okay.
Not a huge deal, but it'd be nice to get it fixed. It's been broken for a week, and just the scheduling. You know, it's you finally get a window of a 4.5 hour window of time for them to come over, but then you know what? We can't do it then. Can we come over right now?
Yeah.
You know, there's a repairman in your area. Call us immediately.
Yeah.
And you know what? I can't do it.
Well, if you need to have the repair guy and be part of the podcast this week, we can do that. I had a guy one time, I called a company because our microwave, we have this built-in microwave, and the fuse obviously went out. And I called the company. I said, hey, here's the model. The fuse went out.
Yep.
They sent a guy over, and he looked at it for about 20 minutes, and he said, yeah, your fuse is out. And then he said, you got to pay for the diagnostic charge. You wanted $99 to diagnose it. I said, I did the diagnosis. All you had to do was bring the fuse. Fix the damn thing.
Man.
But
it's going to cost us $180.
Yeah.
No matter what happens. Minimum.
Right.
You know, oh, well.
Part of doing business.
I can't complain too much. It's like a 20-year-old oven. So
yeah. Well, there you go. At least it's not Thanksgiving week and the oven's going out, right? That would be worse. So let's pivot. Let's go. We got a lot to talk about.
Well,
let's
talk about repairs.
Yeah. Speaking of, out. DeShaun Foster out. UCLA has seen enough of the hire after Chip Kelly, made on the fly, wrong choice, bad situation, just doomed from the start, Wilner. I mean, I think we've talked about this for a while, but were you surprised they did it after week 3?
Not after what happened in the Rose Bowl. I mean, you could make the case. I mean, that was the worst loss UCLA has had in decades, maybe ever, you know, given the circumstances, the opponent, all that kind of thing. I mean, they were absolutely demolished at home by New Mexico. And they quit on DeShaun Foster late in that game. So they had to do it. They were, as few people as are going to the Rose Bowl right now for these games. I mean, if they hadn't fired Foster, the place would have literally been empty for their next home game.
They may not win a game. I mean, when you look at their schedule, it just really depends.
Yeah.
What happens to this roster, because you're underneath the 4-game limit. So you can have guys, you can jump into the portal and be like, hey, I'm just not going to jeopardize my eligibility. You have just a lot of tentacles here with the timing of this. The fourth quarter of that game sealed it for me. I mean, they quit. They got beat. They gave up 21 points. They got beat soundly. Jason Eck, we talked about what a good coach he is at New Mexico, previously at Idaho. That guy, I think, is bound for bigger things, but really unfair situation. Foster had never been a play caller. He'd never been head of a Pop Warner football program. And suddenly, he's the good guy who is the former player hero. And, people got excited just for a blink when he got hired. This is going to be great. This is going to be new culture. And then the game started and you realize this guy doesn't know how to be a head coach. And it's not his fault. It's like if they put you and I in the Nutcracker Ballet and said, go perform, like we're not going to be able to pull that off.
Well, speak for yourself. Well, I would argue that, and we've talked about this, it was clear even before the first game. It was clear at Big Ten Media Day in Indianapolis in July of 2024 when he got onto the podium and was just kind of deer in headlights. Now, should he have been better prepared by his comm staff? Yes. But that to me was a symptom of the larger problem of him just not being anywhere close to ready for the role. And this all falls on AD Martin Jarmond, who a lot of UCLA fans think he mishandled the Chip Kelly situation. I think that's a little bit more complicated than a lot of them believe, but certainly Jarmond erred in the decision to give Foster the job.
that morning in July of 2024, when Foster goes onto the stage and face plants.
Yep.
I had coffee with Martin Jarmon that morning. And it struck me later. He was very excited about, DeShaun's going to come out. He's going to be great. He's going to present well. It struck me later that, the AD at UCLA was having coffee with me. He should have been having coffee with his head football coach and talk, are you prepared? What is your opening statement? Do you have notes? It was evident. I was looking at Foster on the podium that day as he was struggling. I felt for him. Any of us who's been in a situation where you just get in front of a group of people and you're just not quite prepared, or maybe you look up and you realize, gosh, there's more people in the room than I expected, or everybody's been there. Like sixth grade book report, like
You're right.
We've all been there. But he had no notes, Wilner. He had nothing with him. I noticed, Jonathan Smith got up there for Michigan State that same day, I think, and he had notes. He was nervous too. I noticed Jonathan was a little nervous because I've seen him at Oregon State, but he had notes in front of him.
Yeah.
And he had been there before as a head coach. He had been to Pac-12 Media Day. DeShaun Foster had none of that experience. He just wasn't ready for an opening statement. I think if people had just started asking him questions, he would have been fine. But he wasn't prepared. Like, he got up there and he realized, oh, crap, I'm going to have to talk at this thing. And, Jed Fish and Dan Lanning had just hit home runs. And he's he's in the middle of this act. Ryan Day, James Franklin. These guys are all seasoned and they've been there. And he's, for the first time, looking around going, we're in LA.
I'm happy to be here. Glad to be a part of this great conference. Finally putting two great emblems together, UCLA and the Big Ten. We're a school that's won, 123 championships, so this fits us being right in this conference. Football-wise, we're just excited. I'm sure you guys don't know too much about UCLA, but our football program, but we're in LA. It's us and USC. I'm just basically excited, really. That's it. Any questions?
Well, that's partly on his communication staff.
Yeah.
I mean, absolute failure
100%.
on their part.
Yeah, they've got to do their part, especially when he's not been in that situation. You've got to do that. Where do they turn? Because my mind goes to Jonathan Smith immediately, because I think if he had just sat tight at Oregon State, I think he's either at Washington or UCLA. We may not be talking about DeShaun Foster.
True. I mean, I could do an hour on UCLA just off the top of my head, having covered the program years ago and still having a lot of contacts down there. And also just reporting on UCLA as part of the UC system along with Cal, right? I think first, the thing I would start with is you mentioned they could go 0-12. I would argue that might be good for them because they need to hit rock bottom in order for all the people who really matter in determining the future of the program realizing that this is a catastrophe. If they haven't already, maybe they have. I'm not sure that they have, but they need to sound, the 5-alarm fire bell at this point. Now, I don't think anybody can have a reasonable discussion of who they should hire until they figure out who they're going to be in football. They need to decide, are we going to really try to compete for the Big Ten championship? Are we going to try to compete with Ohio State and Oregon and USC and Penn State and Michigan? And what goes into that? Because that is a commitment of resources far beyond anything UCLA has ever done before. Or are they going to decide, you know what, we're fine being 8th or 10th, right? Okay, so then what does it look like to get to that place? Because right now they're in the basement. And I think that they need to decide the structure of the football program. Do they need a GM? Do they need to bring Bob Myers in as their GM? Do they need to reorganize their entire approach to funding the program with campus support? Do they need what about NIL? And
Should they
where
even
is
be
the
playing
campus?
at the Rose Bowl? I mean, that's a
We should get
question.
into that. Let's get
Yeah.
into that in a second. But should they even get more campus support? That's another issue, right? And they've got a chancellor who's been on the job for less than a year. Well, might be about a year. I don't remember exactly when Julio Franks started, but he's not a long time hire. He's a short timer there. He's in his 70s. So there's just so many things that have to get solved before they can actually go to coaches and say, here's our plan. Because as soon as they offer Jonathan Smith or whoever the job, they're going to say, all right, well, what's my funding? What's my staff like? And nobody knows.
Yeah. Here's another one.
Talk about where.
But hold on. But here's another thing. They come out, Martin Jarmon comes out on that Sunday night news conference and doesn't own it. He doesn't own the hire, even though it was his hire. And then he says, we're assembling this committee of alumni and stakeholders. And I just rolled my eyes, and I know you didn't like it. It's just another committee. Let's have a meeting about a meeting so that we can make this hire bulletproof, so that it's not just on me. And hey, by the way, does everybody understand that it's not just me making the decision? Like, there's a lot of people involved with this. No, when you're the AD and you stand in front of the room and you say you're forming a committee. Bill Moose did this when we hired Mike Leach. The reporters asked him, who's on the hiring committee? And Moose said, you're looking at it like it's my hire. Yeah. And so while other people would have been forming a committee, Moose got on a plane to Key West and went and hired Mike Leach. Like, go hire the best coach and then support that coach. And everything that you're saying is right. It all has to be lined up and pointed in the same direction, or you're just fighting yourself and you can't get through it. And
true. But nobody trusts Jarman now. He botched the Foster thing so badly that nobody who matters will entrust him with making the hire. In fact, I would argue he probably doesn't have. He may be part of the committee, leading the committee, but he's not, I don't think, going to make the decision. Certainly not unilaterally. So they've got to do something. Now, here's a little quick backstory. UCLA 20 years ago, I don't want to say exactly which coaching search it was, but UCLA has got a handful of people who know football really well. They know college football. They know coaching. And they assembled this small brain trust informally a couple decades ago when they were looking for a coach. And they asked, who should we hire? And that brain trust came back to AD Dan Guerrero and said, we think you should hire this young special teams coach in the NFL named John Harbaugh. And UCLA didn't hire Harbaugh. Yeah. They went in a different direction. But there are people that those guys are still around. They know coaching and they know the landscape of college football. And I think instead of UCLA hiring these quote unquote business and sports executives, go to your football people who care about the program and say, who should we hire? Who works in the rev share era? Who works with the transfer portal? Who's going to be able to recruit LA? That they have got to lean on football people. If I'm them, it's Bob Myers and then a group of football people, and that's the committee. Where do
they play? Where do they play?
Because where they play. You go. Look,
there's problems at the Rose Bowl. There's a problem there. It's too far from your campus. It flies in the face, I think, of, there are examples like Miami where you can draw away from your campus, but it flies in the face of what college athletics is supposed to be. And I know I'm saying that about a school that left a 108-year-old conference and is looking to the Midwest for all their financial answers, as Bill Walton said. The Rose Bowl in a lot of ways doesn't work. I don't see students at games. You see it half full or 30% full on game days. Yes, there's a 20-year lease. It's impossible. It's going to be a huge financial lift. No, there's not a great on-campus solution, but Petros and money in LA, they suggested, the Drake Stadium on campus, little 11,000 seat stadium. Could you build that out to 30,000? You'd probably have a parking nightmare. You'd have neighbors around the campus pissed off at you. But I think UCLA should be looking at everything, as you say, and that stadium relationship with the Rose Bowl has to be part of it, because I just don't know if it works anymore. You're 30 miles away from your campus and your students. You're asking a lot of people in LA. if your product's not good, you're really not drawing, as
Yep.
we have seen them in this last season or so. And so I think they have to look at the stadium as well. How about you?
I do too. I mean, the Bel Air neighbors have got a lot of money, and there's no chance that they're going to stand pat and let UCLA build a 40,000 seat stadium
right on campus,
right there off Sunset. I just cannot
park in your front lawn.
I mean, I've dealt with the Berkeley neighbors fighting Cal, and the Bel Air neighborhood fighting UCLA. That is unwinnable for the Bruins, in my opinion. I do think that the Rose Bowl agreement is worth reconsidering. You can't say, oh, we've been doing it for decades, it's part of UCLA football, because UCLA is playing Northwestern in a conference game, right? So history and tradition are out. What is the most practical solution? You know, they're talking to SoFi. They're talking to the Rams. I've been told by a couple
I hate
of
SoFi.
sources.
I hate it.
I don't know that SoFi is really better. UCLA has a lot of people. You know, USC's got that hub in Orange of fans and alums in Orange County. UCLA's got a lot of people in the Valley. I don't know that SoFi really works for that. I think that they're just in a bad spot all around, and there's no good solution. But the one thing that would help is to win, right? If they win, I mean, they were drawn in the Rose Bowl 10 years ago when they were winning during a couple of years, like with Jim Mora. But that is part, the stadium is just part of the whole overall calculation of what they want to be and how they want to get there, that they've got to kind of figure out before they can actually go hire a coach. But the location is a really interesting piece.
The way too early prediction for UCLA, I'm going to say Jonathan Smith ends up as UCLA's coach. What's your way too early prediction?
Well, first of all, let me ask you this. How much are they going to offer? Because Jonathan Smith is making, $7.5, $8 million a year in East Lansing. So you have to figure, even though he grew up in Pasadena, that he'd have to get more and take into account the cost of living in LA. So they would probably have to offer him, even with a hometown discount he gives them, they got to probably offer him $9 or $10 million a year, don't they?
You're approaching Lincoln Riley dollars. Look, I think ultimately Jonathan wants to be at USC. I think that's the job he really wants. I was at the Coliseum with him a couple of years ago when Oregon State was playing there and they won.
Yeah.
And before kickoff, Wilner, he walked over to me during warmups. I was on the sideline and he stood next to me and he said, "Hey, look up there." He said, "See that seat right there?" He says, "That's where I sat as a kid."
Yeah.
And there was an air of nostalgia about it. And when he walked away, I went, well, he's leaving for USC if that job ever comes. Like,
yeah, sure.
So is he better off holding out at Michigan State for Lincoln Riley's departure at USC? Because I think Jen Cohen, if she's the AD at USC, I think she hires Jonathan Smith in a heartbeat.
Or Kalen DeBoer, yeah. I would think that, UCLA is not clearly a better job than Michigan State. It's probably a worse job, especially the way it is now. Neither of them have easy pathways to the top of the Big Ten. If I'm him, I would probably stay in East Lansing too if UCLA comes calling, especially if the Bruins. I mean, I don't see how they're going to be able to offer $9 or $10 million a year. I just don't. And
so who do they hire? Who's your way too early pick? Give me just throw a name.
I don't even.
How about Will Stein?
I'll tell you what. No, I think UCLA would be insane for UCLA to hire somebody who's not been a head coach.
Yeah.
They cannot. Everybody down, a lot of people down there want Danton Lynn, who USC's defensive coordinator was at Westwood. Will Stein. There's some good coordinators out there. It would be insane to not hire somebody who has proven that they can win as a head coach. They can't risk it. They can't risk it. To me, I mean, I'll go with what I tweeted out Friday night, which was, has a school ever fired their coach at the final whistle, walked across the field and offered that coach the job?
Jason Eck.
I mean, he won at Idaho. He's winning at New Mexico. He just beat UCLA's brains out. Why not hire Jason Eck? I mean, if you have asked me pick somebody, I'll pick Jason Eck. But I think that they have got a long, long way to go before they can hit the market and be able to answer the questions that their candidates and the agents representing those candidates are going to want answers to.
Move on to another conundrum. How about Oregon State? Trent Bray, about the same record as DeShaun Foster.
Yep.
Alumni, some similarities between sort of the panic move of promoting Foster. Oregon State had lost Jonathan Smith. They hand the keys to Trent Bray, former player. People are unhappy with Bray. But I did have Scott Barnes, the AD at Oregon State, on my radio show this week, and he gave a resounding vote of confidence. Just it wasn't the kind of vote of confidence that you give before you're going to fire somebody 2 weeks later. It was the vote of confidence that said, "Hey, this is my guy. I'm sticking with him." This Bray, Bray has I think been dealt a tough hand, but the schedule this season, the way it was cobbled together for Oregon State, didn't give them any breaks. They got Cal, they got Oregon, they got Texas Tech in the first 4 games of the year. They looked terrible in losing to Fresno State. Should have won the game. But I think Barnes is pointing to the schedule a little bit, saying, I never want to have to put a schedule together like that again. And saying, what I want to see is I just want to see progress down the stretch. And maybe if they're 0-6, 0-7, 0-8, that's a different conversation. But I got the impression he's nowhere near thinking about firing him.
Well, he's got to be looking at the schedule thinking the second half is a lot easier than the first half. Yeah. And if he can stick with Bray, even if they're 0-6, they got a decent chance of ending 4-8 or 5-7. Yeah. Right. And then he can point to the progress. They just got to get through this stretch. I think the App State game will be hard too, but they just got to get through this stretch into mid-October. My view is that they're going to end up having to decide which is more costly, keeping him or firing him. Because if you keep him and it doesn't work out, you've fallen further behind. You've lost valuable time in this restructuring of the landscape. You're going to be not selling tickets, not selling merchandise, not raising money if people are, not happy and they don't want to put their money into a losing product. So it could end up being a very difficult discussion for them.
Yeah, I asked Barnes specifically, does he, is there someone he could bring in to mentor Bray? Because I think some of the ways in which he's fallen short really point to, the things we don't really know about being a CEO of a football program. Yeah. It's the stuff it's not even the football. It's just sort of the umbrella over the operation, dealing with donors, dealing with recruits. He hasn't done well with recruits. He hasn't done well with media. He comes on my show. He's a little stiff and rigid in our interviews. He's getting better, but he's standing up in front of the media contingent at Oregon State. And this is not like being in Philadelphia or New York. And he doesn't look comfortable as he's fielding the questions. And so I think that all kind of, we always say things like we want our president to look presidential. We want the queen to look regal.
Yep.
Trent Bray doesn't look like a CEO when he's in front of the room. And so I think he needs to get better at some of that stuff. He would help himself, but they have to figure out how to snap the ball in a punt, Wilner. Like they're snapping it like they're a peewee football team last week.
Yeah.
It just doesn't look like that's a head coach running the operation. So they're not going to beat Oregon. We're going to talk about rivalry games coming up. They're not going to beat Oregon this week, but they've got to play hard. And they got to look like they're organized and it can't be false starting and snapping the ball over the punter's head. And that kind of stuff has to stop.
Yeah, I don't think they look like they're prepared. I don't think they look like they have great game plans. I think there are visible issues up and down the operation, right?
Yeah.
And, you mentioned the Bray stuff. Not comfortable with the media, right? I mean, I'm thinking about DeShaun Foster at Big Ten Media Day and how uncomfortable he was. Yeah. Sometimes that stuff does reveal whether you're ready to be the boss or not. And you can add to the way they look on the field with the execution and the mistakes. And I think that there's good reason to wonder if Bray's the right guy for the job.
But I also think it's too soon. I think it's unfair to say he's got to go. I don't think Oregon State's in that position given what they've been through.
Yep.
They're trying to reconstruct the conference. They hand the keys to Bray. There's a lot of distraction going on in the background.
There is. But he's going to have a chance, right? Some of those games in late October, November, they absolutely should win those games.
Yeah, they're playing Tulsa. They're playing Lafayette. They've got Wake Forest at home. They've got, there's some opportunities. Washington State twice, there's some opportunities for them to win games, but I kind of look at the number I was looking at was like, okay, I think they're going to be 0-4. Then it's Houston. Then it's Appalachian State. You know, they're 0-6 and talking 0-7. Now you start to have to maybe change the calculus a little bit, depending on how you look and losing those games. So
yeah, Houston's good. Houston's good, and App State going to App State is
they'll punch above their weight.
Yep.
Another AP top 25 miscue. There were a few of them this week. We had one big one last week involving a voter in the West Coast. Another one this week. Brenna Green, who is a TV reporter in Portland, made a mistake on her ballot. She did not have Vanderbilt ranked. She had South Carolina at number 10. She later owned it. I love that she did this. She owned it on social media, said, hey, look, I worked 23 hours before. I covered Friday Night Football. I screwed up. I just made a mistake. Wilner, the West Coast voters are having some issues. You're a West Coast voter. What are you up against when you go to cast that ballot?
Well, yeah, I've done it. Been casting the ballot for a long time, and in various roles, including being a beat writer. And you're walking out of the press box at 1 a.m. and you still got to do your ballot somehow. It can be tough. I typically don't get to my ballot till 1:30 in the morning when I'm done.
When does it due? When's the deadline?
The deadline is 8 a.m. Pacific, I believe it is, and they could certainly help us out here by moving that back a little. Like give us another hour or two.
With the process, like when you go to vote, are you using software?
You're using software. So it used to be that you just type it up and email it to them.
Okay,
and that was easy to make mistakes and leave somebody out. So you log into this dashboard, and there's basically a drop-down menu. So the next to number one, you start typing in, Alabama, ALA, and all of a sudden it autofills. And it's easy to actually have the wrong school autofill. You've got to double check it. That's happened to me. And then you just go down the list, all right, number 19 is Louisville. So you start with the LOU, and then a whole bunch of names come up, Louisiana, Louisville, all that stuff. And by the time you're done entering your 25, there's nothing that says, flashing yellow that says you don't have LSU, you don't have Ohio State. So there's not really a backstop if you make a mistake. And that certainly is an issue. The timing is an issue. You're bleary-eyed. I mean, and it's also harder the first few weeks because there's many more games. Before conference play has started, there's a lot more games. And there's a lot more night games on the West Coast than there used to be. So, yeah, it's tough. Brenna is very dedicated.
Yeah.
And it's not I don't want to get into what happened the week before, but there are some mistakes where you just screw up, like everybody screws up, like what happened to Brenna. And then there's other mistakes where you're not maybe as thorough as you need to be. Those are mistakes of the voter to me, whereas something that happened to Brenna is more a mistake. It's not the process isn't making a mistake, but it's easy to happen. And it's really hard in basketball because there's 360-something teams, and the number of games that you've got to go through on a Saturday. I mean, it takes me hours sometimes.
Okay. So and you're not paid. This is not paid. This is
not paid.
Yeah, because I think one of the points is like, look, if this were just happening all over, and it's a small sample size this season, but both of the big mistakes came from West Coast voters, and and Brenna, to her credit, owned it. She didn't do what the other voter did and, kind of go, well, it's not that big a deal. No, she's like, hey, I just screwed up. I was tired. I worked Friday. I worked Saturday. I was doing my paying job. And then I messed up. I misread the score. She thought South Carolina won the game. Vanderbilt did, so I think that helped. And I also think the fact that the Vanderbilt fan base is not like Florida or Ohio State helps her too, because then it doesn't become as big of a national story.
Yeah. There's a voter, I don't want to say which state, but it's a central time zone state. And there's a voter whose ballot has been subject to extreme scrutiny
Mm.
the last couple weeks, and the issues on the ballot are not related to the logistics of voting. It's about actual inherent bias.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I don't want to name names, but I do, just so folks know, the West Coast issues have been more, it seems, about logistics.
Yeah.
But there's a pretty big situation elsewhere.
Really? So
Yeah,
hold on. I got to spill a little bit of the tea here. Does this involve somebody who's covering a team that they're elevating in the?
yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I think so.
Yeah. Wow.
Or a conference. Let me put it that way.
Okay.
A conference.
Okay.
So
Oh.
but that stuff happens every year. I get just slaughtered every week, every year, right? And we talked about this. I
But
think
you
last
love
week.
it. Come on.
Well, I don't care about that part. I like the voting, and I
Yeah.
think it's an important piece of the college football machinery, and I'm honored to do it for the AP. Um, it's important, right? I mean, look, we got an exact the USC Michigan State game starting at 8 o'clock Pacific this weekend. That's a direct correlation, directly correlated to the AP poll, because
Mm.
NBC had the second pick of the Big Ten
Mm.
games this week, and they saw a ranked Illinois and a ranked Indiana playing each other, and so
Mm.
NBC picked that game, which then dumped USC and Michigan State to the 8 o'clock start. So the networks use the AP numbers, AP rankings to pick their games. So
Wow.
it does matter.
It does.
And it's an important historical record too, I think.
Yeah. It all matters. Let's pivot to the rivalry games, which have mattered for years. Oregon State and Oregon will play in the Civil War. Washington State and Washington will play in the Apple Cup. Huge point spreads for the Pac-2 schools being huge underdogs in these two matchups. Enormous point spreads, in which I, frankly, at this point, think both of the favored teams will probably cover. But, some questions around the Civil War with fans saying, hey, should this game continue to be played? Scott Barnes, the AD at Oregon State, told me that they are interested in playing it. They want to play it. They're working with Oregon very closely on a longer-term deal. They will not play next year because both schools are contractually obligated in other directions.
Yep.
You're going to skip 1 year, but Barnes says they'll come back 27 and beyond. I'm getting the same messaging from Oregon. They've already cleared the deck in 27 and 28 to play Oregon State. They want to play it. Everyone wants to play this game, but and they have their reasons, financial mostly. But I think it's not going to feel like it's not November, right? It's going to be a sunny September day. Just something about it that doesn't feel like the rivalry.
Well, and same with the Apple Cup too, right? Yeah. Which is also Saturday. Is this the largest point spread in history of the Civil War?
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's since, yes.
35, 36 points. It's not, and Washington State's facing this not quite as bad, but similar situation. They're like a 20-point underdog, and it's hard to see how the dynamics within the two rivalries are going to do anything but continue to go in their current direction, right?
Yeah.
The disparity is going to keep growing with the economics of the sport and the costs of putting together rosters, and the Big Ten money versus the Pac-12 money and all that.
Sure.
So is it worth it competitively? I think it is for both Washington State and Oregon State. I think it's good for the sport in the Pacific Northwest, but it's complicated. I mean, in Washington's case, they want to play 7 home games every year. If they play the Apple Cup, they can't schedule a home-and-home series with LSU or Clemson or whoever, right, outside of a conference play. So there is a limiting component to it. The other thing is we have no idea what the sport's going to look like after 2030.
Yeah.
And so we have no idea. I don't think either rivalry, the 4 schools can't commit to their rivalries beyond 2030, I don't think.
Right. I agree.
So,
and I think, look, Oregon wants a nice, easy travel game. It works for them in that sense.
Yep.
Most years, I think they probably think they're going to beat Oregon State these days.
Yep.
And Oregon State likes it because every other year they get a home game, part of their TV package against a Big Ten opponent. And you're not going to get a Big Ten opponent to come to Research Stadium.
Nope.
So this is a win for Oregon State. I think it's going to be a lot of years before we see Oregon State play Washington and see Oregon play Washington State. But, Colorado plays Colorado State. And I would use that as an example of like, hey, that game's good for both sides. And I think it's good for the rivalry games here to continue.
So you don't think the Cougars or Beavers have much chance here?
I think there's a real shot that Jed Fish in Washington, they remember last year. They remember the way Washington State was dancing around the field. I think there's some bad feelings there. And Oregon is just so talented. I kind of think like, Oregon State and Oregon could be like 49-7. Dan Lanning, I think, is going to be compassionate. I don't think he's out here to embarrass anybody. But I think if they line up and play their seconds, they're going to probably boat race them anyway. Like they're just too deep and too good.
Yeah. They are. I think that's true for sure in the Civil War. I do wonder if Washington State being at home will.
Maybe. I hope they're games. I mean, I hope I would love to see competitive games or have this feel like it's competitive. But speaking of big games, how about the big one this week? Texas Tech at Utah, Big 12 game. What do you think?
Breakfast in Rice-Eccles Stadium. It's the big noon game, so it's starting at 10 a.m. in Salt Lake City. I think Utah fans are stoked about it. I think this will be it's just a huge game in the Big 12, right? These are two, I think they're the two betting favorites right now. Certainly two front runners. Both of them are ranked. Great chance to see how Utah's new offense is going to form. Part of the fascination for me is that we have no idea what Utah's really like. I thought we knew when they smoked UCLA in the first game, and then we see what happened to UCLA, and all of a sudden you're thinking, you know what? Utah winning in the Rose Bowl by 43 points, that doesn't really say much because New Mexico just won in the Rose Bowl by 35. Yeah. So I'm very curious to see how Devin Dampier does in this and Kyle Whittingham's new offense, partly because I think Kyle Whittingham wants to retire after this year, and he wants to go out with a winning team. And what happens on Saturday is going to tell us a lot about the direction for the Utes.
I love Utah in this game. I'm just a big believer in what Kyle Whittingham's doing. Got a chance to see a little bit of Texas Tech against Oregon State. They looked great, but Oregon State not good, didn't play hard. So I'm fascinated by what happens, but give me the Utes. I just think they're better. They're more complete. I think I trust Kyle Whittingham when he says this is my best offensive line that he's ever had.
Yep.
I think Utah's going to the playoff. I think they're going to win the Big 12. I think they're going to make the playoff. I think we're going to look up. Wilner, here's a fearless prediction. I think we're going to look up. There's a chance we look up at the end of the year, and the CFP field includes Utah and Cal, and is very Pac-12 heavy from the old days. And the narrative goes, well, wait a minute, what was wrong with that conference? Because I think you're going to see a big Pac-12 influence on the playoff field.
Boy, I didn't realize you were into narcotics.
You look at Cal's schedule.
Believe me, I have looked at Cal's schedule. I just wrote a whole column about Cal's schedule,
they don't have to win the ACC to get to the playoff. They could be a one-loss team playing in, be the 10 or 11 seed.
Well, I would say I don't think there's any chance in the world Cal will get into the playoff unless they are in as
I'm going to save the receipts.
Save the receipt. Right now, Cal's not getting in the playoff unless they're the ACC champion. They get the automatic bid. There is no way, even with a one-loss runner-up, Cal's not going. No, there's just no way that's going to happen because of that schedule. Cal does not play Florida State, Clemson, Miami, or Georgia Tech. Yeah. Right.
So put him in the ACC title game, and let's see what happens with the rest of college football. If you are a Power 4 team and you're sitting there with one loss, they're gonna have a hard time keeping him out.
I don't know. The quarterback is terrific. And they did a lot better in the transfer portal than people thought. And they have made some smart hires on offense. They got Brian Harsin as the coordinator, former Boise State coach. They got old Rolo himself, Nick Rolovich, as the senior offensive analyst. And he really is that guy. He knows his offense, and he's working out well with the quarterback. But they will stumble. I get it.
All right. You're predicting a stumble. I'm saying if they don't stumble,
All right.
I'm putting Utah and Cal in the field. If
9-3 is
don't-
possible for Cal. I would not be surprised, but nothing beyond that. I just cannot see it.
There he is. I would love for people in the comment section to give us their way too early pick for UCLA's head coach. Tell us what you think of the rivalry games. Should they go on? And also tell us what you think of Utah and Texas Tech. Give us your winner, your 5-star pick for the week. Make sure that you subscribe, hit the subscribe button so you don't miss a thing. You can read me at johncanzano.com. Find him at wilnerhotline.com. We're back next week.
Thanks, everybody.